All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. On this edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast, I have the privilege of being joined by a very dear, good friend of mine, and that is the one and only Coach Dennis Ward. Coach Ward, welcome as always. And anytime that it's time to talk about the silver and black, your beloved Vegas Raiders, I can think of nobody else to talk shop with on that subject.
Well, man, happy to be here as always, man. It's my pleasure. And listen, man, it was a rough year last year. But as I told you before the year started, it was going to be that.
Listen, it was a very rough year. You know, we saw the Raiders go 8-9 the year before, barely miss out on making the playoffs. Of course, the firing of Josh McDaniels midway through that season, the team rallied around interim head coach Antonio Pierce. Um, Mark Davis, the Raiders team owner, was on the fence about bringing Pierce back for 2024 until some of the vets on the Raiders went to bat for Pierce. But of course, it did not work out that way. They went 4-13. They traded wide receiver Devontae Adams to the New York Jets. And I've talked about it before, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more right now because this is going to be a very important offseason for the Raiders. And of course, from the outside looking in, somebody would be like, well, they were only 4-13. The Raiders have been bad for so long. How could this offseason be important? Everything that you said that I said right there is true, but you got to look at it like this. Trying to keep up in that division. We've got the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, I know that they just lost the Super Bowl a couple of weeks ago, but we're still talking about a team, three Lombardi trophies since 2019, five Super Bowl appearances, the greatest, or arguably the greatest quarterback in the game right now, future Hall of Fame head coach, and Andy Reid as well. You've got the Denver Broncos. They finally gotten things turned around. They have themselves a Super Bowl winning head coach in Sean Payton, who is building something there. They have their quarterback of the present and future right now in Bo Nix, who they drafted in the first round last year. Then you look at the Chargers. The Chargers just got to the playoffs under Jim Harbaugh, a coach who has not won a Super Bowl, but he got the 49ers there. And then on top of that, he just won a national championship a couple of years ago at Michigan. They have their quarterback in Justin Herbert. So if you're the Raiders, you've got to find a way to keep up with the Joneses in this division. And of course, the Raiders went winless in the AFC West this past season. They lost a couple of heartbreakers to the Kansas City Chiefs. Really wasn't close in their games with the Denver Broncos or the Chargers. And now, with all of that said, you got to find a way to keep up with these guys. Started off on the right foot, bringing in veteran head coach Pete Carroll. I think Pete Carroll's got something to prove after the Seattle dismissal following the 2023 season. Talking about a guy, he's in that rare air. Won a national championship as a head coach at USC, and of course, won a Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks. I think it's only Barry Switzer and Jimmy Johnson that could say that as well. So, how do you feel about the Raiders as this offseason has begun for them?
All right, let's go back to the start. So, with the whole players going to bat for Antonio Pierce and him actually getting a job, that's because the year that Rich Bisaccia took over and the Raiders made the playoffs, the year they lost to the Bengals in the first round, they didn't retain Rich Bisaccia, and it had a negative effect on the team. So, that's when they hired Josh McDaniels. And I think that's what led to Antonio Pierce getting his job. But as we discussed before the season started, this was a setup from the beginning. The team didn't have enough talent. They had some really huge holes. And above all, the team didn't have a quarterback. The other teams that you have named that are in line to do something special now all have quarterbacks now. All of these teams have quarterbacks. The Broncos happen to draft theirs because, the right guy fell to them and the combination of coach and quarterback married, and they've had success with that. But you have to find your quarterback. You don't find your quarterback, it doesn't matter who the head coach is. So, you got Pete Carroll coming in. And I do like the fact that he's someone that has built programs, whether it be at college and the NFL. So he's done it on two levels, and he's proven that he knows how to put together a winning culture, and he's a player's coach. So I think there's a lot of positives into having Pete Carroll. Yeah, he's 72 years old, or however old he is. But I am personally a fan of that particular hire in that space because it's exactly the kind of person that is needed. Now, I'm hearing there's supposed to be a succession plan in place where they hire him, he builds the program, and then when it's time for him to retire, someone that's already in-house will take over. So we'll see how that goes. But, like I said to you before, the whole Devontae Adams trade thing, I told you the Raiders should have traded Devontae Adams when we did our draft podcast. Told you that. I said they have to trade him now. This team's not going to win. He's going to get him happy. Boom. We ended up trading him. We get a fourth round pick. If we traded him the day of the draft, we probably could have got a second or third or even more.
Right.
You just, selling things is about when it's worth the most money. You selling things when you don't want it anymore. You're just going to keep losing money, I don't know. And then you got the whole Max Crosby saga saying he wants to be traded. I'm not so sure if they'll ever let him leave that place. So we'll see how that goes. But, you know, as far as the coaching is concerned, the coaching will be dictated on if they can find themselves a quarterback. You got the Matthew Stafford buzz lingering around. Now they're saying that the Raiders would trade for Matthew Stafford. I don't know if I would trade for Matthew Stafford unless it was a fourth round pick. And I don't think Sam Darnold is an answer for another team besides the Vikings because I think he was a product of the succession of the whole offense, the players around him, and the coaching staff. So there we go with those two things.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, it's kind of, and it's going to be buyer beware for Sam Darnold. It's one of those where out there where I got a feeling somebody's going to overpay for him, just due to the fact that hey, there's really not a lot of quarterbacks out there, and you look at where the Raiders pick in April's draft, they have the sixth overall pick. More than likely a Cam Ward or a Shador Sanders are not going to be available there. I know some people are talking about Jackson Dart being a second round quarterback, the kid out of Ole Miss. Me personally, I do not feel that Jackson Dart will be there. Does Jackson Dart have first round talent? No. But, we know all along that it only takes one team to get very desperate. And there are a lot of teams out there that do need a quarterback. I think the Raiders go veteran quarterback here. Okay. I know people are talking about it. Well, on the surface, what about a Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll reunion? That's not as cut and dry as some people think it will be. Is it a possibility? Absolutely. It's one of those where you have an Aaron Rodgers out there, and I'm just throwing the name out there because I feel like this, and I know you're shaking your head already, but I'm just saying from the standpoint, I think Aaron Rodgers, is he near the end of his career? Absolutely. But I don't see him wanting to finish his career the way that it went last year with the New York Jets, okay, on a 5-12 team. And just hypothetically throwing it out there, Aaron Rodgers, working with the Tom Brady, type aspect behind the scenes. Because I feel like Tom Brady and Pete Carroll are like a couple of guys that actually could get Aaron Rodgers to listen and to buy in because that's something that clearly, has not happened for like the bulk of his career. But you threw the Matthew Stafford name out there. I'm totally with you. I mean, I feel like the Rams, the rumors that you're hearing as far as them looking for a first round pick, you're not going to get a first round pick for Matthew Stafford, especially an older quarterback who you still got to pay. I think they're just playing on the desperate part of teams, and maybe again, if you ask for it, they can't say no if you don't ask for it if you're the Rams. So of course you can go out there and ask for a first round pick. Are you going to get a first round pick? I don't think so, but I think definitely it starts with there. They've got their head coach, okay, but they have to get the quarterback situation taken care of. We know Brock Bowers is a stud, and he's going to be a stud for years to come. They have other holes to fill on this team, but it won't amount to a hill of beans if they don't get that quarterback position taken care of.
Well, let's go from the top. I don't know if you want me to save my draft prep for now. I know we normally do our draft stuff, but
Listen,
um,
listen,
so
put
you got, so here's the whole thing, and I've been doing a lot of looking into the quarterback thing because every year it seems like the Raiders have needed the quarterback since the last 2 years after Derek Carr, they decided to ouster him and get nothing for him. Again, not taking advantage of your assets and
right.
getting value for things. Um, so of course, the first two guys are going to be guys. So the word on the street is um, that you know these teams ahead of us don't necessarily love these guys. So don't be surprised. So um, I went to a coaches convention and I happened to meet someone from a certain team that's ahead of us. And this guy was a quarterback's coach on one of these teams. And I met him, talked to him quite a bit. We had a very lengthy conversation. And the first thing he said to me was, I don't like either of these guys. He goes, I got to watch more film. He goes, but on the surface, I don't like either of these guys. And that was the first thing he said to me. So I'm starting to hear like, like these pass rushes are getting pushed up, and these guys may end up sitting there at six. Here's how I feel about the Raiders and what they have and what they need to do and what they should do. They don't have the luxury of trading a high draft pick for a quarterback because they have so many other holes to fill. The team is not quarterback ready. They still need another two offensive linemen, one or two, right? The two guys they drafted last year, DJ Glaze ended up playing pretty solid. And you have Jackson Powers Johnson who flipped between guard and center. I didn't really get a chance to assess whether he was better at guard or center, but he seemed to have a decent season. And again, I haven't broken down any of that film, so I can't give you much on that. But there's not much speed at wide receiver. Jacoby Myers is the best player out there. He's not a speed guy. You got Trey Tucker, who doesn't have the best hands, and he's undersized. So you're going to need at least two more pass catchers, and then Brock Bowers' world can be easier. They need speed to open up the field for this guy. Then the Raiders need a running back. Luckily, William, this is the absolute best year to need a running back. There are going to be guys drafted in the fifth and sixth round. You're going to be like, how was this guy not a first round pick? There are so many good running backs this year coming out. So I'm happy. I think the Raiders need to get two of them. I just think we just need talent on offense. The team does not. And I said this to you last time. We didn't have enough talent on offense. And there's no way the defense will be able to hold up because we can't play power football and just run it on a team. And we didn't have the mechanisms in place to throw the football like we needed to score enough points. So, that's that part of it with the first two guys. The Jackson Dart guy, I actually happen to like him. I watched him one night. I was on the phone with one of my OCs from my school I coach at, and we were talking about him. And then boom, he goes to the Senior Bowl and he blows up at the Senior Bowl. So, late first round might not be too crazy for Jackson Dart. Okay. And then you have the kid from Indiana who I'm starting to notice. I can't pronounce his name, Tyler something. I hate to not have the name ready because I wasn't draft ready, but this guy's talent is through the roof, William. Through the roof. So don't be surprised. You'd be like, who? When? This kid, they're saying he's got more talent than Jackson Dart. But Jackson Dart was efficient. He knew how to read pass coverages. He was quick. I liked a lot of things about Jackson Dart. But the way things are, I just don't know how those quarterbacks are going to shake out. But, these first two guys getting the going in the first round, that's a pretty much a given. Jackson Dart would be that next guy. But the best thing for the Raiders to do is to stand pat, take the best player available. This is what they did with Brock Bowers. This is why Brock Bowers panned out. They took the best player there. Okay. The year they drafted Tyree Wilson, who was the next best? Who was the next pick, William? Do you know that?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Jalen Carter.
There you go.
Take the best player available. He's one of the best players in the league right now. We'd have taken him the year before. We might not have. Do you get what I'm saying? And I
Yes,
know he had
absolutely.
his issues in Georgia, but just please, please, that's all I want them to do is take the best player available. This is not going to be an overnight fix.
No, it's not going to be an overnight fix. I could see something with the Raiders. Um, getting that quarterback, the veteran quarterback, in free agency or a trade, using that first round pick on an impact player. I feel like this. Travis Hunter's probably not going to be there at number six. Maybe, maybe you get your hands on an Abdul Carter out of Penn State. You know what I'm saying? Because Abdul Carter has top three talent, yes, but typically, and I always preach this, the teams that are consistently picking early in the draft are consistently picking early for a reason. It's because they don't know what they're doing. And I feel like if you're picking that early, you have needs, multiple needs. You can't be in a position where you could say, hey, you know what? Let's take the best player available. So maybe an Abdul Carter falls to the Raiders at number six, and then you can bookend him with Max Crosby. Okay, so that would sure up one situation right there. Why? Because we're talking about Mahomes in Kansas City, Herbert in LA with the Chargers, and then of course Bo Nix in Denver. And I think this past season Super Bowl a couple of weeks ago was a prime example of showing people, hey, no quarterback likes pressure, so you got to be able to heat these guys up. A guy like Abdul Carter could come in and help the Raiders, but like I said, they still need to go out there and find that quarterback. And speaking of quarterbacks, in
Well,
your opinion.
let's stay on this Abdul Carter conversation here.
Hmm.
This is all dependent on one thing. So I'm scheduled to go to Penn State next month, and when I get back from there, I'm gonna let you know what you know. Uh, I'm proud to say that one of the Erasmus Hall players, Lyric Samuels, just enrolled there. He's the number one player in the state, wide receiver. He's at Penn State, so we're going next month, and we're gonna go see him. So that'll be fun. Now, when I get back, I'll let you know how that went. But the Abdul Carter thing is going to happen like this. Now, remember this now, William. The scouting combine is next week, or basically this week, like later on
Right,
this week. It starts Thursday. If Abdul Carter runs, he won't be there at 6 because I think he's going to run like a 4-4. So then what's going to happen is, so you got Abdul Carter, you got Mason Graham, you got Travis Hunter. These are like three difference makers, right? Then you
right,
have two quarterbacks. Where do we pick? Sixth. We're just outside
yeah,
of that sweet spot. Last year there were more good players. This
right,
is why when we were at 13 and then all the quarterbacks got squinched up early into the draft, we ended up getting a Brock Bowers because he got pushed down because the quarterbacks got pushed up.
right,
Now, Jackson Dart's not going to get pushed up into that three. It won't be three of them. So we won't get one of those elite guys like that to where it can make that kind of so Abdul Carter's a pipe dream because he's gonna be gone in those first round picks. Nobody's gonna let that kind of athleticism out that top five. You'll get fired for that. Now you got those other guys. There's some other pass rushers now that got some juice, and then one of those guys might get pushed up, and then you can see his kind of sort of what you would say in a way reach in like a Pierce. You got Pierce out of Tennessee. You got Michael Williams out of Georgia. He who has absolutely no production, but a super athlete. So there's guys that are gonna get pushed up, but I mean. I really don't know what is the guy like. At 6, because you look at the pick, you're like these guys are gonna go. Who's gonna be here? Then now you got a kid. All right, let's just say we need playmakers. You got Ted McMillan from Arizona, elite size. We don't know what he's gonna run. He's in the Mike Evans mold. He's like a version of that. I'm not so sure if we got the luxury to take a wide receiver at 6. But to go back to what I was saying, best player available. What if he goes to the combine and everybody says, all right, he's the sixth best guy? Because it's a bit of a crapshoot by most people's standards. Once you get past those first five guys, everybody's grade is pretty much the same. So you were
yeah,
saying quarterback?
yeah. No, I was just saying, with quarterback, and I'll segue to that, real quick. Is first and foremost, you look at the Giants. The Giants had the sixth overall pick last year, needed a quarterback. They took the best player available, Malik Neighbors. Okay, that's all well and dandy, but what good is it to have a wide receiver if you got nobody to throw on the football? And I think the Giants were a prime example of that. But like the point I was going to make with the quarterback scenario, you've got Tom Brady as a minority owner behind the scenes. My question to you is, how much of an impact do you think he is having on the personnel decisions right now?
I think he's the reason Pete Carroll's there. Nobody was thinking Pete Carroll's going to take an NFL job. I'm not even sure if he was looking for one. I think he got a phone call. Do you get what I'm saying? I don't think Pete
Absolutely.
Carroll was out there interviewing. I think they said, "Yo, this guy's sitting on his couch doing nothing. He's better than all these other guys we're looking at. Let's get this guy." So I think he's had an impact. The personnel decisions, I'm not sure exactly if he's going to be in the room. He's got a real tight relationship with Shador Sanders, by the way.
Yes, yes.
So Tom Brady and him, Tom Brady's been coaching him since he was a kid, and he's got real clean footwork and stuff like that. But now they're trying to say that Shador's sliding. But let's just say Shador's on the table. All right, he's on the board and the Giants are up. How would you feel if the Giants took him?
Listen, I think the Giants do take either him or Cam Ward, who are there, because, I've talked about this before, and I say, hey, the Giants are really not in a scenario where they cannot take a quarterback. I just feel that what the Giants are going to do, they're going to take the wrong guy at quarterback, just due to the fact that they took the wrong guy last year when they had all of those quarterbacks there, and B, they spent too many years finagling, worrying about trying to get something out of Daniel Jones, which wasn't there. And of course, the rest is history for what happened with them this past season and what happened with the Philadelphia Eagles with Saquon Barkley in the backfield. But nonetheless, I do think, Brady is having an impact behind the scenes, and it really would not surprise me. It won't be today. It will not be tomorrow, but maybe within the next 10 years or so. Hey, Brady's no longer the minority owner of the Raiders, and Brady is more like the majority owner of the Raiders. And I'm not saying he would take complete control, but it might be like, hey, a 55-45 split in his favor, a 60-40 split. We don't know. But nonetheless, I could totally see that happening. I could totally see Brady coming in, with a group of investors, buying out a chunk of Mark Davis's share with the Raiders and taking over. It's one of those where I truly do think that Brady is making his impact behind the scenes. You hit it, I think, right on the head with him being the reason why they got Pete Carroll. And one thing for sure, I think the Raiders are going to compete, and I truly think it was a Tom Brady hire of Pete Carroll. I also think behind the scenes, it was a Tom Brady firing of Antonio Pierce. I know some people would say, well, on the surface, maybe there's some bitterness about Super Bowl 42. I don't think so. I don't think Tom Brady's that petty. But I just think that, you know what? It's one of those where I feel like Antonio Pierce was not his guy. And, I talked about it then, and I'll say it again, just like I talked about with New England firing Gerard Mayo. I'm not in favor of teams firing head coaches after a year, just due to the fact that, hey, you really don't get an opportunity to get your system established within a year. And in the case of Antonio Pierce, he never had his quarterback. Okay, I will give him that. I don't think he gets another opportunity to be a head coach in the NFL because of the way that things worked out this season. But nonetheless, I think going forward, the Raiders front office, at least, everybody, in my opinion, I feel is on the same page as far as the head coaching hire with Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll will bring them credibility. Pete Carroll will bring them respect. And like you talked about it before, Pete Carroll will establish a system. Okay, that's something that the Raiders have not been able to say in a long time. You figure in the last 25 years now or so, the only two times that the Raiders can honestly say, or two of the three times that the Raiders can say that they had a system in place, two of those times was with John Gruden. The first time with John Gruden, and the second time with John Gruden. I'll give them credit for the tenure that Jack Del Rio had there with the Raiders, because he was building something. And of course, it was unfortunate that year that they made the playoffs, and of course, they didn't have Derek Carr. He got hurt late in the season, but nonetheless, having everybody on the same page right now, I think is going to be big for the Raiders going forward.
Well, 100%, and the whole GM thing too, that got a little mucky too. Let's not leave that part out. But
Absolutely.
it was good that they got a GM in there and the GM came in and he's actually going to pirate. I thought Tom Telesco did a good job last year in the
Hmm.
draft. I was kind of sad to see him go because we get these people in there that run GM rooms and they just, you draft a bunch of who, what, so it was good to see a good, solid draft, good players from good programs, and they came in and made a difference. We need about three more drafts like that. And back to the whole Antonio Pierce thing. I told you this before the season started when we did our pre-season presser. There wasn't enough talent on that team. He was never
No.
meant to succeed, William. He was there as a sacrificial lamb, period, point blank. As a coach for 20 something years now, you know when you're going to win and you know when you're not going to win. There's no flukes, William. You know, we walked on the field. I walked on the field in preseason and before our high school season started last year, sorry. And we were looking around at the talent. I walked past the head coach and he goes, "Okay, we got enough to do it again." We knew then we were going to the championship, William. In the off season, before we did anything, we knew at that time. Walking past people, the kids on the field, all the coaches were there. I'm just looking at the scene. We had about all the kids in house that we were gonna have. That's what we said to ourselves. That was in the summer. That was in the summer. He knew he wasn't gonna win. The organization knew he wasn't gonna win. They knew Gardner Minshew was going to effectively lose. They could have chosen anyone else. I couldn't believe they actually chose him. And then they chose to start him over Aiden O'Connell, who's obviously better. I told you I wasn't a fan of the whole Gardner Minshew thing. I just knew it wasn't going to work. So I don't know if they were trying to lose or not. And then they win those two games late in the season last year. To
It
me,
pushed
I
it
think that
pushed
was
them down.
right. That was an Antonio Pierce. You know what? To the
Yeah,
org. All right, yeah, I'm going all the way out. There, take that with you.
it's
Because
kind of it.
when he won the first game, it knocked him down to third, and then he won the second game and pushed him to sixth. Because then the Giants lost and won a game in that time, and then it catapulted him. It was ridiculous. We
It's kind of like the Lovie Smith scenario a couple of years ago with the Texans. You know what I'm saying? And then he won, and then basically he was a dead man walking, and then he was like, "Okay, I'm gonna show you." And then of course that win, I think it was over the Colts in the final game of the season, cost the Texans the first overall pick. They still lucked out because Carolina ended up taking Bryce Young over C.J. Stroud, but nonetheless, yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from.
he was set up to fail. There was never that he was gonna win. So we'll see. Right now, we know who the best teams are, William. There's no surprises
Right.
in the NFL. There's no surprises. We talk about it, but we know
Hmm.
it's gonna be the Chiefs again. We know it's gonna be the Eagles again, the Vikings again. Maybe the 49ers come back, get healthy, you know, Detroit again. Those teams with the infrastructure, because over an extended period of time, they did one thing well, that was draft players, because it's impossible to have a team full of free agents and be successful. That's
No.
why the Raiders are eternally bad, because we haven't been consistent enough at drafting. We hit here and there on a guy, and then, you know, and then the guys, that's another thing. There's 25 free agents on this team, William. This might be a whole different team.
Trust me, it's going to be a whole different team because clearly I don't know Tom Brady from a can of paint, but I'll tell you like this, I don't see him sitting up there saying, and this organization saying, "Hey, you know what? We're not going to re-sign a whole bunch of guys that helped us go 4-13." And of course, you brought Pete Carroll in. This is an opportunity for Pete Carroll to begin, not do, because like to your point, it's going to take multiple drafts, okay? But this is an opportunity for Pete Carroll to come in and start, establishing his system and start putting the guys on this roster that he wants. Also, additionally, the Raiders are going to have close to $100 million in cap space. So you have a situation where you're basically going to be picking high in every round, and then you're giving Pete Carroll the opportunity to go out there and sign some guys in free agency. They're not going to go out there and go crazy from the standpoint is like, you know what, let's go out there and spend a ton of money on one guy. I won't think so. I would hope not, because, they're not a guy away. But nonetheless, I think between the draft and free agency, they're gonna find a way to start reshaping this roster.
Well, if I was them, I would make sure I bolstered one unit. So last year they signed Dexter Lawrence to a free agent contract. He comes back off an injury. Malcolm Coots, who we drafted out of Buffalo a few years ago. Matter of fact, he's a
You mean
Gruden.
you mean not Dexter Lawrence, Dexter Lawrence's teammate at Clemson,
Um,
Farrell. Was
no,
it?
Colin Farrell. No, we signed Dexter Lawrence in free agency.
No,
He got hurt.
no,
We s-
Dexter Lawrence is still with the Giants.
wait. Oh, so who was the other defensive tackle from that team?
It wasn't Dexter Lawrence though, man.
It wasn't Dexter Lawrence. You're right.
No,
It was the one that was on the. It was the one that was on Miami.
Christian Wilkins.
That's who we signed.
Christian Wilkins.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta do a better job. Yeah. So he comes back off an injury,
Mm-hmm.
and we get Malcolm Cooch is a free agent. All right,
Right.
we could probably sign him. So there goes your other edge, right? He had eight
Mm-hmm.
sacks on the other side of Max Crosby. You got interior pass rush. Okay, now let's bolster the secondary, get these guys playing together. Bolster one unit, give yourself something to hold on to. Then you can figure out how you're gonna win. You can't just, be all over the place and see. This is a really deep draft for interior defensive linemen and
Mm-hmm.
running backs and even edge guys. You can some of these teams can get a lot better this year if they pick the right guys. You can hit about two of these guys. And if we're going to be a team that's, so what, we don't have a quarterback. Okay, bolster the offensive line, get a couple running backs, and run the goddamn ball. Let's just find another way to win because, Pete Carroll's smart. That's how he used to win before. All right, now if you get running backs in the O line, okay, go get Russell Wilson. He can make a couple throws down the field, keep the defense honest. Maybe you can win a few games until you can find that other guy. I don't know. I don't have
Well,
the answer. It'll be interesting to see which route they decide to go. That's what I'm going to say.
well, they definitely need to bolster that offensive line. They definitely want to look at running back. I mean, nobody ran the football worse than the Raiders did last year. And I think, we just, you quickly talked about, the Giants, letting Saquon Barkley go and how that affected them. What about the Raiders with Josh Jacobs? He was another guy. He left, scot-free in free agency. They got nothing back for him. And then the Raiders were dead last in the National Football League in regards to running the football last year. I think their leading rusher was Alexander Madison. He had like 400 and some odd yards.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was a backup too to
Right.
Zeus White, who I told you. Remember what I said at the beginning when we had that conversation? I
Yeah.
said, William, he's not it. He's a great athlete. He doesn't have the vision. This is when you learn to appreciate real good running backs. You just went through it with the whole Saquon thing. Essentially, they were running behind almost the same exact offensive line Josh Jacobs. Why was Josh Jacobs getting yards? How was he getting yards, William?
Yeah.
Because he's a savant. This guy finds holes in places that they aren't. He makes them by setting up the blocks. You know what I call that? Making a dollar out of 15 cents. When you
Mhm.
find you a running back that can make a dollar out of 15 cents, you got a run game. And look
Yeah.
what he did. He went up there and they didn't run block that well in Green Bay,
And he
but he
still
made a
had
dollar.
and he still had one of the better running seasons in that franchise's history. I think Amon Green and I think maybe Jim Taylor had better, yards, for the season in a season for the Packers at running back than Josh Jacobs just did.
Yeah. And it's a shame that the Raiders decided to do that because, it's just dumb. He came out and he said something on one of those things, and he was like, I'm not gonna take a pay cut to lose or something to that effect. And I was like, damn, I can't get mad at him for saying that because I understand you're gonna take a pay cut. I might as well get paid more money if I'm gonna keep losing, you know. But it's stupid. At the time, William, when they decided to let him walk like he was used goods, he was
Mhm.
26 years old. He
Correct.
just turned 27
Hmm.
on February 11th. The young man just turned 27. You think he's done? I'm
No.
so confused. What are we doing here? You trying to win? And then they wouldn't have had to pay him that much money either. This is the dumb thing. The money that the Giants didn't pay Saquon, the money that the Raiders didn't pay fucking Josh Jacobs is like $2 million difference between what they were offering and what they wanted them to have, all because of how they view running backs. And now with Derrick Henry at 30 years old, going and lighting up the league, these guys producing in their later years, so to speak. I
And
hope the NFL comes off this BS about running backs and them not being important, them being replaceable, and them not being worth right, money.
and that Derrick Henry contract was a steal. We're talking about 2 years, 16 million dollars. And I mean, we saw the season that he had. He darn near had 2,000 yards for the Ravens, and they got to the playoffs. But yeah, nah, listen, I mean, you're gonna see. I mean, you're going to see at least one running back taken in round number one with Ashton Genty out of Boise State. But like to your point, there are a litany of running backs out there in this year's draft. But they've gotten the head coach, clearly, okay, and Pete Carroll. With a solid draft and a decent showing in free agency, how close do you feel that the Raiders are to competing in the division? Not pushing for a playoff spot, okay, not winning the division, just plain out being able to compete in that division.
Compete. Let's just say we win one or two games in the
AFC
conference.
West.
Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
2.5 seasons. And here's why I say a half. Because
Mm-hmm.
in some way in there, they got to discover who this quarterback's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't always get it that way. But I think somehow, some way, like I said, if they just decide they're going to win the games another way,
Right.
and they decide to bolster up one of these units, whether they decide they're going to win on defense, win with a running game and a running back and an offensive line, then
Mm-hmm.
it can be done. You know, it can be done. You can cause a headache for these teams. The Raiders had the friggin' Chiefs beat this year, and,
Yeah.
fumbled the ball. You know, it,
Yeah.
it's rough being a Raider fan, man. But I listen. But you're a Giant fan, so I get it. We understand each other, man. We understand each other.
Yeah, listen, man, it's going to be a very I'm really going to be keyed in to see what they do in free agency when it does begin in a couple of weeks. I really want to see how that money is spent. I want to see how many guys on this team are re-signed because again, like I said, I don't see Tom Brady and company lining up to say, "Hey, we're going to sit up there and re-sign a whole bunch of these guys that just helped us go 4-13." I think they're going to give Pete Carroll and company the green light to now go out there and try to shape this roster in his image. I mean, you remember Pete Carroll basically did that with Seattle, and some of the first guys that he brought in via draft. Um, it was Earl Thomas. And remember, I think he took Earl Thomas over his own safety at USC and Taylor Mays. And Pete Carroll clearly knew what he was doing in that decision. Taylor Mays did not have the career that some people expected him to have, and he darn sure did not have a better career than Earl Thomas. Then, of course, bringing in your Cam Chancellors, your Richard Shermans, your Bobby Wagners, and so many others.
Right. And
So
all of those guys are late round picks, by the way.
Right.
Bobby Wagner, Cam Chancellor was a fourth round pick, I want to say, and Sherm was like a sixth or seventh.
Yeah.
Sherman's a fifth. Sherman's a
Hmm.
fifth.
Yeah.
Well, none of these guys were high. This is how you win. You have to hit in those areas of the draft. Those guys fill out your team. You hit
Right.
on enough of those picks, and
Right.
that's why I gave the number 2.5 years because if we draft well in the later rounds, do well with the high round picks, but draft well in the later rounds, and those guys pan out at
Hmm.
some point. Then you could have a team good enough to challenge one of these teams. The Chiefs routinely hit on third, fourth round picks. The Jarius Sneed wasn't a high pick.
No.
They had to let him go because he was worth too much money because he didn't have a first round pick, fifth year option. So they couldn't
Right.
just hold him.
Right. Well, I'll like one final question I'll ask for you. Okay, and I'm asking this now. We will definitely reassess this the closer we get to the season. No schedule's out right now. We don't know who the Raiders are going to sign in free agency. We don't know right now who they're going to draft. But right here in late February, I know the season just ended officially. Realistically, off the top of your head, how many wins do you see this team possibly having next season?
Uh, 5 or 6.
Okay. And I think that is realistic, coming from where they're coming from, and I think also transitioning now to Pete Carroll. And like I said, I really want to see what they do at quarterback. I like what they got at head coach. You know what I'm saying? I know some people are gonna be like, well, Pete Carroll's old, this, that, and the third, but like honestly, he's going to give them stability, and I feel like already he is giving them some stability, and this is what the Raiders need. Okay, and you can't expect to compete in that division if you don't have front office stability, if you don't have stability from the head coaching position, and if you don't have a guy at quarterback. So I do think, Pete Carroll will try to piece this thing together, and he will make them respectable. I don't think it's going to be an overnight thing, but nonetheless, I think they will be better by week one of next season than they were at week 18 to finish this season. Those are just my 2 cents on it.
It'll be interesting. I'm interested to see which way they go before I get
Hmm.
excited about anything. I want to see some sort of plan that I can say, okay, they're going this way with it,
Right.
because I think too many times people, don't understand that you need a direction. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to sign Justin Fields. Meanwhile, you might not want a quarterback that's a runner.
Right.
You might want a pocket guy that you can run play action, throw the ball on the field.
Hmm.
So we'll see. Like I said, if they're going to decide to do that, they got to get better up front. And we need running backs that know how to be running backs, not just good
Right.
athletes. It's funny because the best running back on the team last year was a kid named Sincere McCormack. He was on
Hmm.
the team for 2 years on the practice squad. I was like, oh, I like this guy. He started getting in. He had like 2 good games and he gets hurt. And I was just like, how bad is this for this kid? I felt so bad
Yeah.
for him, man. So, I bet if I bet money right now, he's probably cut by the time we get to the season next year. But nice kid. He looked like he was, about to be something out there. So.
No, like I said, man, it's gonna be interesting to see how this thing plays out. But like I said, my next thing that I'm paying attention to for the Raiders, I want to see what they do in free agency because they're gonna try to plug some of those holes there. You know what I'm saying? Not all of them, but I think they are gonna try to plug some. And I think, they're gonna be they're not. I don't think they're going to overpay for a guy. Maybe they might give a guy maybe like $1 or $2 million more to try to get him there. Yeah, but it's not going to be a situation where we're giving a $10 million a year guy $20 million a year to come play for us. I don't think it's going to be one of those type situations. But I do think that they will begin to try to get ahead of this thing.
I mean, at this time, there's nothing to entice a free agent to want to come to the Raiders just because they want to play for the Raiders. There's
Other,
not enough
other
talent. There's not enough talent anywhere to say, like, oh, if we had receivers or quarterback, oh, I could go over there and work with those guys. Oh, they got a good old line. I could play behind that. Draft us a George Sanders behind that offensive line could be possibly the worst thing to happen to him because we can't pass protect and he holds the ball too long. So,
Taking a quarterback early, if you're the Raiders, would only make sense if you had a veteran quarterback to kind of throw out there early on. And I think if the Raiders were to do that, Pete Carroll is a guy that could uh, that could get away with it because Pete Carroll is not leaving anytime soon. All right, so some of these teams they tend to throw these rookie quarterbacks out there too early when they're not ready. I think the Raiders could go in and be one of those teams with the guys that they have in the front office right now and say, hey, listen, we can take a kid early, but we don't necessarily have to play him. Remember, Pete Carroll signed Matt Flynn, okay, and they still used the third round pick on Russell Wilson at quarterback. And of course, by the time the training camp ended that year for the Seahawks, Russell Wilson had beat out Matt Flynn. And of course, the rest was history because people thought, seeing Matt Flynn come in for an injured Aaron Rodgers with the Packers, okay, he was going to make some money in free agency. He made the money, yes, but it wasn't that long. It didn't take the Seahawks too long to see that they had their guy. Maybe we have another scenario like that this time around for Raiders. You got to wait and see.
You got to be careful with those. This is why the Sam Donald situation kind of gives
Oh
me
yeah,
pause. I don't want to just run out and do that because you
right.
don't know what made him successful. And he did happen to struggle down the stretch a little bit, and you have to wonder what was happening there. Was it a communication thing? Was it, teams catching on to what they were doing and
Hmm.
forcing him to do things he didn't do well? Like, was he fixed? Is the $1 million question, William. You know what I mean? Like,
Right,
you can't tell that because as someone that calls plays and designs offense for quarterbacks, you doing your best job to hide the deficiencies. And the better you do at that, the better your team looks. But no one knows from the outside looking in. You get what I'm saying?
right,
And these guys are smart in NFL. You can't run a play from series to series and think it's going to work the next time. Like these guys
right.
have made the adjustment already. So we will see. I don't know. I would have to see Sam Darnold do that again before I want to throw a bag of money in. And I happen to like Sam Darnold. I wouldn't have been mad if we'd have signed him
Hmm.
last year. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
But Sam Darnold got smart. He said, I'm not going to these bad teams where they make me look worse. Let me go find a quarterback, a coach, and an infrastructure that can help me look good. Boom, J. McCarthy goes down. Bam. Here we go. Success.
Listen, I mean, it's one of those, it's like 2 years in a row for Sam Darnold because he's with the 49ers. Before that, he didn't play well in the one game that he did have for the 49ers that year against the Ravens on Monday night. But nonetheless, you figure you go to Kevin O'Connell with the Vikings. You're throwing the football to arguably the best receiver in the game right now in Justin Jefferson. And it's kind of, it's one of those where it's like, Justin Jefferson can make a lot of quarterbacks look good. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? He
And don't
had
forget about Jordan Addison is not bad either. So
Exactly, so it's one of those where I think it was a perfect fit for Sam Darnold. A team like the Raiders can clearly pay him more money, and I think that's what it's going to come down to. I think, and I've been talking about this for a while. Somebody's going to overpay Sam Darnold. You know what I'm saying? Because it might not necessarily be the Raiders, but somebody's going to do it because there's so many teams out there who are desperate for quarterbacks. Okay, and when like the old saying goes, desperate men do desperate things. Okay, so somebody's going to overpay for him, and if you don't have the proper system, and I think this season showed that if you don't have the proper system for a guy like Sam Darnold, it is not going to work. And to your other point, as the season progressed, more teams found out what he could and could not do. And go back to that playoff loss for the Vikings to the Rams. The Rams just heated him up. That was all it was, and basically what we saw from Sam Darnold, we saw the Sam Darnold that a lot of people saw with the New York Jets. You know,
first of all, somebody drug test Jared Verse. Like he should be like in permanent. He was throwing offensive linemen around. I'm like, yo, this guy, I knew he was good, but the sheer strength that he showed, I don't know what he took before the game. He definitely, I know he got drug tested after that, William. But, but back to that point, it happens to each and every player that next year around. Look at CJ Stroud this year. Teams will figure you out. You have to have the answer.
right.
You have to have the answer. But see, back to something that you said, and I don't think you realize how bad this is. Um, you were like, yo, there's a quarterback. William, the quarterback shortage is going all the way down into the youth area. Like I'm coming from where they're babies and coming all the way up through high school. There's hardly any quarterbacks in high school. There's none being developed in youth. Don't be surprised. And one of my colleagues said this a few years, maybe like early this year. Don't be surprised if you see the NFL shift back to more run-oriented football in a few years, or you see more teams leaning on the run more because they're just less signal callers, true pocket passes, or guys that really can throw the ball down the field with accuracy and consistency. And you see more run-based offenses similar to
Right.
Philly, smartly planned, a guy that could do a little bit of both,
Hmm.
and just control the game and play good defense. Because the quarterbacks, man, there's a quarterback shortage all around. It's not just coming, from here. You got like Rajah Bell's kid. You remember he's in high school in Florida. He's like the number one quarterback. It's not, but it's not that many. Archman is taking his sweet time. Archman is going to stay in college for 6 years if he could, probably. So where are these quarterbacks coming from? Just look at this. Look how bad it is. There's a 37-year-old quarterback that a team wants a first round pick for.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Hey,
You know
listen.
why? You know why? Because he's still probably one of the three or four best throwers of football in the whole league.
Yeah.
He still is.
Yeah. Listen, I like I said before, desperate men do desperate things, and somebody is going to overpay for Sam Darnold. Might not necessarily be the Raiders, but somebody is definitely going to overpay for him. You know. But Coach D, we covered a lot on this, man, and as always, man, this is a pleasure, and I thank you once again for talking shop about the Raiders because, like I said, I mean I've known you for a long time, and you wear your Raiders emotions on your sleeve. Okay, so like I said, there was not, and there is not, a better person to talk silver and black with than you.
Thank you, William, man. Good, glad to have, glad to be on your show again, man. I look forward to it every time we get together. We talk some good stuff, man. We go back and forth. So whenever you're ready again, just shoot me a text.
You got it, man. And thanks again to Coach Dennis Ward for chiming in on this edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast. If you like what you heard and saw on this podcast, please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line to be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So for Coach Dennis Ward, my name is William Martin and I am signing off. And I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.